Hey, and welcome back to another video. In this video we're going to be setting up the main menu widget as well as creating the settings widget. With that, let's get into it. We're starting off with by going to the main menu, open up the level, and then we're going to go over to edit, project settings, and then we're going to go over to maps and modes, and then in the editor startup we're going to select the main menu because we're going to be in there for a while. We might as well just make sure that every time we open the project we end up in the correct level. And then we're going to head over to content, widgets, main menu, and then we're going to open up the main menu widget, and then we're going to dock it at the top, and then we're also going to open the settings widget. And then I made a mistake in a previous video where I created the tab button video. This was created by accident. It was during a time when I was experimenting and I didn't remove the widget, but we don't actually need it, so we can just delete that widget. And then we're going to get started on the main menu. First, we're going to add a canvas panel, and then in the canvas panel we're also going to add an overlay. And then we're going to select the overlay, and then by the anchors, if you click and hold shift and control and then click on the ball, and then it will resize itself as well. And then with that we're going to add a size box. We're going to add the size box to the overlay. And then in the size box, what we're going to do is we're going to add the buttons. So we're going to add 3 buttons. We're going to add 1 button, and then we're going to add a text. Sorry, I forgot. We need to wrap the button with a vertical box. So on the button, we're going to right click, go to wrap with, and then we're going to select a vertical box. And then we can control D the button, and then control D again. And then we're going to take the size box, we're going to select it. Okay, so the size box, we're going to place it at the bottom left. And then in the padding, if you want to move anything in an overlay, you just add padding to it. So on the left, we're going to add a padding of 50. And then to the bottom, maybe something like 250. It's a bit much. 150. I think that should be fine. And then on the buttons, we're going to add a padding of 10 all around on each one. The first button in the text block is going to be the play. The second button is going to be the settings, and then the last button is going to be the quit. With that, we're going to compile, and then just make sure that all the buttons are variable. So is variable, also going to rename them. First one is play, set it to is variable. The settings as well, I'm going to call this one settings. Select is variable, and then quit as well. Quit, and then is variable, and then you want to compile, head over to the graph. Then we have the buttons. In the event graph, we're going to take the play button, then we're going to select unclicked. For the settings, going to do the same thing, and for the quit as well. So for the quit, I'm going to drag off and then look for quit game, and then that's going to be it for the quit. For the settings, we are going to drag off and then remove from parent, and then after we're going to drag off and then create widget, and then the widget we're going to create is the settings widget. And then from the return value, drag off and then add to viewport. That's it for the settings. And then for the play, we're going to drag off and then look for does game exist, and then the game we're going to look for is the pawn, and then we're going to drag off from the return value, then look for the branch. Let's just drag these two down a bit. So if it's true, we are going to open level by object reference, and then the level we're going to open is the workshop. But if it's false, we are going to then open level by object reference, and then the level we're going to look for here is the dealership. So the reason I'm setting up like this is during the first playthrough there won't be a save game, and the save game we're going to use here is for the pawn, so the blueprint that the player is currently driving. So what you want is during the first playthrough, when the player first opens the game, we want to look for the save game. And then if it does exist, which means the player does own a car and has played through a bit, we want the player to go directly to the workshop. But if the player doesn't yet have a save game, then we want to send the player to the dealership so that they can go and buy their first car. And then that's it for the main menu. We're going to compile and save. And then we're going to head over to the settings. So in the settings, we're just going to create it for now. We'll fill it in later when we create the other widgets. So in here also, what we're going to look for is a canvas panel. And then we're going to look for a border, drag in the border, and then we're going to do the same thing with the border. Select anchors, shift control, select all over, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go down to the brush color and then drop it to a darker color. Then just save that. We also need to reduce the opacity so that we can see through it. I think that is fine. And then on the border, we're going to add a background blur. So the border, background blur. And then the blur strength, we're going to set it to 5. And then we're going to add a vertical box. We're going to go vertical box, drag it onto the canvas panel. And then this one as well. Go over to the anchors, shift plus control everywhere. And then we are going to create a horizontal box, drag it into the vertical box. By the padding, we're going to set it to at the top by 20. Then we're going to line it to the middle. And then in the horizontal box, we're going to add buttons. So we're going to select the first button into the horizontal. And then this button, we're going to right click and then wrap with size box. And then we're going to head over to the width override, and then the width we're going to set it to 250. This is just so every button has a uniform appearance instead of them having different widths based on the content of the text size. And then what we're going to add next is the text. So what I mean by that is if you just take a button, just a normal button, for example, and we add it to the horizontal, and we take a text, and then as you can see, the one button has a width of 250, whereas this one will resize itself based on the length of the text inside. So if you change the text to, let's say, just text instead of text block, and then as you can see, the button has shrunk, but with the button that has a size box on it, if we take the text and we remove the block, and then the button remains the same, it's just the text inside that has changed. So that's what we want. We want a nice uniform appearance between all the buttons at the top. And then just gonna select this button and then right click and then wrap with size box, and then this one also with override to 50. And then we're going to take the size box and then control D again. So we're going to have 4 buttons at the top. These buttons are going to correspond to the widgets that we have that we're going to create later on. So what we're going to do is each button is going to create a new widget. What we're going to add is a widget switcher. So every time you select a button, it's going to switch to a different widget. So the widgets we're going to have is the graphics, audio, the controls, and gameplay. So each one of these is going to correspond to one of those widgets, and then they're going to switch between when you select the button. So I'm going to close the horizontal. Actually, let's just name the text real quick. So the first one is going to be graphics, and then we're going to give it a padding on the left and right of 10. Oh no, sorry, wrong one. Just undo that. We need to give the button a padding of 10 on the left and on the right, just so they can have a little bit of spacing in between them. And we'll do this for all the buttons. Then the second button is gonna be the audio. Third button is going to be the gameplay, and then the last button is going to be the controls. With that, we're gonna close off the horizontal box, and then we're gonna add in another border on the vertical box, so it sits underneath. And then this border, we're gonna put a padding of 50 left, 50 right, 20 top, and then 20 at the bottom. We're gonna create like a separation, and then we're gonna add the widget switcher to the vertical box. So here we have the vertical switcher, the widget switcher, and then in the widgets we're going to look for the different widgets. So first we're going to look for the graphics, and then drag it into the widget switcher. The next one we're going to look for is the audio, the WBP audio, and then add that to the widget switcher. And the next one we're going to add is the gameplay, add that one as well to the widget switcher. And then the last one is going to be the control, add that one as well. And then after the widget switcher, we are going to add a horizontal box. Look for horizontal box, add that to the vertical box. Just close all of these for now. And then this one, I'm gonna, at the bottom, 30, at the top, 20. And then inside of it, we're gonna have two buttons. Then we're gonna have text. Then we're gonna take the button and then duplicate it. And then the one button, we're gonna set it to the left. And then the other button, we're gonna set it to the right. And we'll set it to fill. Then we're gonna add a padding on the right of 150. And then the other button, a padding on the left of 150. And then set this one to fill as well. And then the widget switcher, you also want to set this to fill. So this is how the settings widget is going to look. And then the empty space here will be filled with the widgets when you select the buttons that correspond to each one at the top. The one button in the bottom left, we're going to call this one the back button. And then the other button is going to be the optimize button. So we're going to compile and save. And then we're going to head over to, actually, I think we should do the same with these buttons at the bottom as well. Select the button, right click, and then wrap with size box. Then select the size box, a width of 250. Then do the same with the other one. Right click, wrap with size box. Select the size box, width override, 250. So now all the buttons are uniform in size. Compile, head over to the graph, and then in the graph, what we're going to do is we're going to take the buttons. Oh, we forgot to set them to is variable. Actually, let's just do that. Graphics button is variable, audio button is variable, gameplay button is variable, and then the controls button is variable. Then we're also going to do the back button and the optimize. So just rename these ones as well. Back button is variable, then the optimize is variable, then compile and save. Head back to the graph, and then we're going to select the buttons. So we're going to have the graphics on click, audio on click, gameplay on click, and then controls on click. I'm going to select the back button on click, optimize on click, then the back button, drag off, and then remove from parent. From the remove from parent, drag off, and then create widget. The widget we're creating is the main menu. And then from the return value, drag off, and then add to viewport. And then for the optimize, we're going to drag off and then get game user settings. From the return value, drag off and then run hardware benchmark, and then just leave it as is. And then from the get game user settings, return value, drag off, and then we're going to apply hardware benchmark results, and then connect the execution pin. Then we're going to compile. Then we're going to do the other buttons. So on the buttons over here, we need the we don't actually have it. Select the widget switcher, and then just need to make this is variable as well. So just is variable. I forgot to do that. Back to the graph. So now we can drag in the widget switcher. Control, drag it in, and then we're going to drag off from the widget switcher, and then we're going to look for set active widget index, and then that's going to be it. So we're just going to take this code and then Control D, and then connect it to the audio. Then we're going to set the index to 1. Then we're going to Control V, set the next one's index to 2, and then Control V one last time, and then set the index value to 3. So each one of these corresponds to the widgets that we set up in the widget switcher. 1, 0, 1, 2, and 3. And that's why we also create them in the order of graphics, audio, gameplay, and controls, because that's the order we set them up as. And then that will be it for the settings. And then as a demonstration as to what the final result will look like, this is what the final result would look like: the graphics, audio, controls, and gameplay. you select either one at the top, it will switch to the relevant widget, and then we'll go back and the optimize. So once we have created all the other widgets or have filled them in with the information, and that is what it would look like at the end. So that brings us to the end of this video, and in the next video we are going to be working on the graphics, and until then.